Every parent says their children are the most important thing in their life. It's probably the most universal statement in human society. We'd die for our kids. We'd give them anything. They're our whole world. Okay, great. So why is it harder for them to buy a house than it was for us? Why do they graduate with debt we never had? Why are they more depressed, more anxious, and more suicidal than any generation in recorded history? If they're so important, why does every single piece of data suggest we're treating them like an exploitable resource? I'm about to show you something that's going to make you angry. Maybe at me, maybe at yourself, maybe at the system. For the first time in American history, 30-year-olds are doing worse financially than their parents were at 30. Not slightly worse, dramatically worse. They earn more dollars but can afford less life. And this isn't happening to them. We're doing it to them, through our votes, our policies, our refusal to change systems that benefit us at their expense. This video is about the gap between what we say about our children and what we actually do for them. It's about how we've created the largest transfer of wealth from young to old in modern history and called it progress. It's about how we've made it nearly impossible for them to achieve what we achieved and then blamed them for not working hard enough. So let me ask you directly. Do we love our children? Because I've looked at the data, and I'm not sure the answer is yes. Let me show you why. Parents celebrate children on social media and spend fortunes on birthdays, gadgets, and enrichment activities. Yet the systems these children inherit make adulthood harder, poorer, and more stressful than it was for their parents. A contradiction sits at the centre of modern life. Children are adored in private but abandoned in public policy. This crisis stretches beyond economics. Youth mental health is deteriorating at historic rates. Anxiety, depression, and suicide are rising sharply. A generation is growing up more connected digitally, but more isolated emotionally, facing structural barriers that previous generations never encountered. Consider housing, the cornerstone of generational stability. Homeownership once symbolized upward mobility for anyone willing to work hard. It was the foundation of middle-class security. In the late 20th century, median home prices were roughly 3 to 4 times the median household income. Families could realistically purchase homes in their early 30s. Saving for a down payment was challenging but achievable. Today, in many countries, home prices have grown to 7, 8, even 15 times the median income. In major job-centered cities, ownership has become almost mathematically impossible for young adults. This is not a shift in lifestyle preference. It is a collapse in affordability. This affordability crisis didn't arise naturally. It was engineered. Local governments, influenced heavily by existing homeowners, blocked new construction for decades. Zoning laws froze neighborhoods in time, restricting density and keeping property values high for older generations while shutting younger ones out. Before young people even reach the housing market, the educational system has already placed enormous burdens on them. Higher education was once a gateway to opportunity. Today it functions more like an expensive filter. Universities have adopted pricing models that mirror luxury brands, limited enrollment to maintain exclusivity, ever-increasing tuition, and billions spent on amenities that have little to do with learning. Public institutions, once affordable paths to advancement, now operate like competitive corporations. Tuition costs have risen dramatically, far outpacing inflation and wage growth. Students now graduate with levels of debt that limit their economic mobility for decades. This shift has turned the pursuit of opportunity into the accumulation of obligation. The result is an education model that traps millions. A degree is required for many entry-level jobs, yet obtaining that degree demands loans that delay home ownership, family formation, and entrepreneurship. Education is no longer a ladder, it has become a burden. Combined with housing, healthcare, and cost of living increases, these pressures have produced a historic economic reversal. Across the developed world, adults in their 30s are now statistically worse off financially than their parents were at the same age. Wage growth has not kept pace with real purchasing power. While nominal wages have increased, they now buy significantly less due to inflated costs in essential areas such as housing, medicine, education, and childcare. Meanwhile, an unprecedented share of economic gains has flowed to capital rather than labour. Corporate profits and asset values have surged, concentrating wealth among older generations who entered the market earlier. If wages had kept pace with productivity since the 1960s, the minimum wage would be dramatically higher than it is today. This economic transformation has created a deep divide. Institutions that once uplifted broad populations now primarily benefit elites, either the exceptionally talented or those with inherited advantages. Education identifies the top 1%. It no longer elevates the bottom 90%. The pandemic magnified every existing weakness in the system. When faced with crisis, governments around the world prioritized protecting existing assets over supporting generational renewal. Massive economic interventions preserved wealth for those who already had it. Asset markets surged while millions of young people faced job losses, stalled careers, and deteriorating mental health. The economic rebound disproportionately benefited older asset holders. The long-term cost of this protection will be carried by younger generations through higher public debt, reduced services, and diminished opportunities. The crisis became yet another example of transferring burdens downward. Mental health metrics reflect this strain. Teen depression, anxiety disorders, self-harm incidents, and suicide rates among young people have risen significantly over the last 2 decades. These trends cannot be explained solely by culture. They reflect systemic pressures. The environment young people grow up in limits their willingness to take risks. Debt, unstable housing, and high living costs force them into risk-averse behavior. Starting businesses, relocating for jobs, or experimenting with careers has become too dangerous financially. Simultaneously, youth are immersed in unregulated digital ecosystems. Social media platforms intentionally exploit attention, comparison, and emotional vulnerability for profit. Generations are being raised on psychological experiments driven by engagement algorithms, not well-being. Policy institutions have not adapted to this new landscape. Many nations are governed by leaders significantly older than the median citizen. Political agendas reflect the priorities of older voters, who participate at far higher rates than the young. This imbalance shapes everything from tax policy to housing laws to social spending. When electoral power sits with older generations, the system naturally allocates resources to them, even when younger people need them more urgently. As a result, younger citizens widely believe their countries are headed in the wrong direction. They experience stagnant wages, rising costs, institutional neglect, and policies that favour those who already own property and assets. Social security systems reflect this skewed prioritisation. Enormous sums are spent supporting retirees, including many who have substantial personal wealth. Meanwhile, much smaller investments in children and young families are dismissed as unaffordable or irresponsible. This indicates a fundamental inversion. Societies are financially supporting the wealthiest generation in history, while underfunding the poorest and most burdened. Addressing these issues requires structural changes. Tax systems must become more progressive, ensuring that those who benefit most from economic growth contribute proportionally to sustaining it. Capital gains and labour income should no longer be taxed in ways that reward passive wealth over work. Technology companies must face antitrust enforcement and age governance rules that reflect their influence over youth mental health. Social media access for young children should be limited, regulated, and aligned with developmental science. Education must be reformed to expand capacity and reduce cost. Public universities should grow enrollment, cut tuition, and refocus on instruction rather than prestige. The goal must return to opportunity, not exclusivity. Housing barriers must be dismantled. Zoning laws should be modernised to allow multifamily development, increased density, and affordable housing construction near employment centres. Policies that protect property values at the expense of generational opportunity must be replaced. A society's strength is measured by what it builds for its future, not what it preserves from its past. The question is not whether change is possible, it is whether collective will exist to prioritise the next generation. A civilization flourishes when older generations plant trees under whose shade they will never sit. Today, many nations are not planting such trees, they're harvesting the forest and leaving barren ground behind. So the uncomfortable question returns, do modern societies truly love their children? If the answer is yes, then the policies, budgets, and priorities must begin to reflect it. Love cannot remain sentimental, it must be structural. The future will be defined by whether that shift happens in time.